I stared across the mahogany desk at Brandon Hartwell, 26 years old and fresh out of business school, watching him fidget with his expensive pen. His words still echoed in my mind like a slap across the face. Your vibe doesn't match our new direction, Crystal. 11 years. 11 years, I'd poured my life into building this company's inventory management system from nothing. 500 warehouses, real-time tracking, algorithms I'd written myself during countless sleepless nights. And now this kid wanted me gone because I questioned his cost-cutting plans. I slid my security badge across his polished desk surface. You have 15 minutes before every stock count goes completely out of sync, I said quietly. Good luck with that. The elevator descended past floors filled with memories I'd helped create. When Robert Hartwell hired me fresh out of college, at 24, this company operated 12 warehouses and tracked inventory with spreadsheets. I remember walking into that cramped office space, seeing sticky notes covering every surface, watching employees frantically calling warehouses to verify stock counts that never matched. Robert had vision but no technical expertise. Build me something that works, he'd said during my interview. I don't care how long it takes or what it costs. I need to know what we have where we have it and when we need more. That simple request became my life's work. I started with basic database architecture learning, warehouse management principles through trial and error. Late nights turned into early mornings as I coded automated triggers, designed user interfaces, and created backup protocols. Robert would bring me coffee at midnight, checking on my progress without pressure. He understood that good systems take time to develop properly. The breakthrough came during year 2, when I integrated predictive analytics. Instead of just tracking current inventory, the system could forecast demand patterns, seasonal fluctuations, and optimal reorder points. Warehouse managers went from constantly running out of stock to maintaining perfect availability ratios. Customer satisfaction scores skyrocketed. Robert treated me like family. Christmas bonuses, birthday cards, genuine concern when I worked too many consecutive days. He promoted me to Director of Information Systems at 27, then Vice President of Technology Operations at 30. My salary grew alongside my responsibilities, but more importantly, I felt valued and respected. The system evolved into something beautiful. Real-time synchronization across locations, automated vendor communications, integration with shipping companies and retail partners. Custom algorithms I developed could predict inventory needs 6 months in advance with 94% accuracy. Industry publications wrote articles about our operational efficiency. Then came that terrible phone call 6 months ago, Robert's assistant voice shaking, telling me he'd collapsed during a board meeting. Massive heart attack. Gone before the ambulance arrived. The funeral drew hundreds of employees, vendors, and competitors who respected what we'd built together. Brandon inherited everything. MBA from an expensive university summer internships that I'd supervised, but zero understanding of day-to-day operations. His first company-wide email focused on maximizing shareholder value and eliminating operational redundancies. The language felt cold, corporate, nothing like his father's personal touch. Walking through our office building for the last time, I noticed changes Brandon had already implemented. Gone were Robert's employee appreciation programs. The break room coffee machine now required payment. Parking spaces closest to the building were reserved for executive staff only. I tried adapting to Brandon's leadership style, really tried. But when he announced plans to outsource our entire technology infrastructure to reduce costs, I couldn't stay silent. During last week's operations meeting, I'd explained why our custom system couldn't be easily replaced. Generic warehouse software might work for simple operations, but our complexity required specialized solutions. That's exactly the kind of outdated thinking we need to eliminate, Brandon had responded. Everything can be optimized through modern efficiencies. He'd used that phrase constantly since taking over. Modern efficiencies. As if efficiency was something new I'd never considered. My security badge beeped one final time as I exited the building. 11 years of institutional knowledge walked out with me, But Brandon didn't seem concerned. He had consultants now, people who charged 5 times my salary to tell him what he wanted to hear. The parking garage felt eerily quiet as I reached my car. In exactly 14 minutes, the first automated maintenance routine would attempt to run without proper authorization credentials. By tomorrow morning, Brandon would understand the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical experience. But I hadn't expected to discover what he'd already done behind my back. My phone started ringing before I reached home. Jessica Martinez, my assistant for the past 3 years, sounded panicked. Crystal, I need to tell you something. Can we meet somewhere private? We sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Diner, where the afternoon crowd provided enough background noise for confidential conversation. Jessica's hands shook as she stirred her coffee. I wasn't supposed to know about this, but I overheard Brandon talking to those consultants from Pinnacle Solutions. She'd accidentally walked into the conference room during what she thought was a routine meeting. Instead, she found Brandon reviewing termination lists with 3 executives in expensive suits. He's not just replacing you, Crystal. He's eliminating the entire inventory management department, all 37 positions. The words hit like physical blows. Sarah Kim from data analysis, fresh out of college with brilliant insights into customer behavior patterns. Marcus Thompson, our warehouse liaison who'd worked his way up from loading dock supervisor to operations coordinator. Janet Foster, approaching retirement after 15 years of meticulous record keeping. There's more, Jessica continued. Those contracts he mentioned, he signed them last month. The offshore company starts taking over our systems next Monday. Everyone's being let go with 2 weeks severance. I thought about Robert's promises during company meetings. Loyal employees are family, he'd always said. We succeed together or we fail together. Brandon had apparently never absorbed those lessons. Jessica pulled out her phone, showing me screenshots she'd discreetly taken. Email chains between Brandon and board members describing our current system as legacy technology maintained by resistant personnel. My name appeared in several messages painted as someone who lacks vision for modern business solutions. The betrayal cut deeper than professional disagreement. I'd trained Brandon during his college internships, teaching him basic database queries and warehouse procedures. He'd seemed genuinely interested in learning the business from ground up. Apparently, that interest was purely academic. He told the Pinnacle people that our system was outdated and inefficient, Jessica said, claimed it was costing the company millions in lost productivity. But you and I both know that's complete nonsense. Our efficiency ratings are industry leading. I scrolled through more emails, finding correspondence between Brandon and potential investors. He was positioning himself as the innovative leader who would modernize his father's old-fashioned company. Employee costs were described as unnecessary overhead that modern technology could eliminate. The timeline became clear. Brandon had been planning this transformation since taking control 6 months ago. My termination wasn't spontaneous reaction to questioning his decisions. It was calculated removal of the primary obstacle to his cost reduction strategy. There's something else, Jessica said quietly. I found purchase orders for new office furniture and executive bonuses totaling more than what he'll save by laying everyone off. This isn't really about cutting costs. She was right. Brandon was redistributing money, not saving it. Instead of paying experienced employees who understood our complex operations, he was hiring consultants who would charge premium rates to implement generic solutions. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon's assistant. Please sign and return the attached non-compete agreement by end of business today. Failure to comply will result in forfeiture of your severance package. The non-compete clause was broader than anything Robert had ever required. It prevented me from working for any company in the logistics, technology, or retail industries for 18 months. Brandon was essentially paying me to disappear while he dismantled everything I'd built. Jessica leaned forward. What are you going to do? I thought about the system currently running without my oversight processing millions of dollars in transactions every hour. Brandon's team had no idea how many manual interventions I performed daily to keep everything synchronized. They saw the smooth operation, but didn't understand the careful maintenance required behind the scenes. I'm going to let him learn the hard way, I said finally. But as I drove home, I realized the situation was even worse than I'd imagined, because I just remembered something that would make Brandon's week far more interesting than he expected. The offshore replacement system he'd purchased was designed for our simple warehouse operations, not our sophisticated multi-channel distribution network. I knew this because Pinnacle Solutions had pitched the same software to us 2 years ago. Robert and I had evaluated it thoroughly before concluding it couldn't handle our requirements. Brandon had apparently never bothered to check whether the replacement system was actually compatible with our operations. He'd simply accepted the consultant's assurances that all warehouse systems are essentially the same. They weren't. And tomorrow morning, he was going to discover exactly why expertise mattered more than cost savings. Sleep came in fragments that night. Every few hours, I'd wake up thinking about some critical process that would fail without proper maintenance. 20 years of technological evolution had created a system so sophisticated that most people couldn't comprehend its complexity. The inventory management platform I'd built wasn't just software. It was an integrated ecosystem connecting 500 warehouse locations with thousands of suppliers, shipping companies, and retail partners. Custom APIs I developed handled real-time data synchronization between incompatible systems that had never been designed to communicate. At 6 a.m, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and laptop, remotely monitoring system performance through read-only access that Brandon's team hadn't discovered yet. Warning indicators were already appearing in the Southwest Regional Hub. Inventory discrepancies that started small, but would cascade into major problems within hours. The offshore team from Pinnacle Solutions was attempting to log into core modules, but they couldn't access the security architecture I designed. Multi-factor authentication required not just passwords, but also biometric verification and location-based tokens. I'd built these protections after a competitor tried hacking our system 3 years ago. My phone rang at 7:15. Marcus Thompson sounded frantic. "Crystal, something weird is happening with the Phoenix warehouse counts. The system shows we have 12,000 units of product SKU 4792, but the physical inventory only shows 8,000. That's never happened before." I knew exactly what was occurring. The automated reconciliation routines hadn't run properly last night because the authentication credentials were locked. Without those processes, the system couldn't verify physical counts against digital records. Small discrepancies would multiply exponentially as more warehouses reported similar problems. "Have you contacted Brandon's team?" I asked. Marcus laughed bitterly. "I tried calling the support number they gave us, reached some call center in Mumbai where nobody understands our inventory codes. They told me to submit a ticket through their online portal." More calls followed. Janet Foster from the Atlanta Distribution Center reporting that automated reorder processes had triggered duplicate purchase orders worth $400,000. The system was ordering products we already had in stock because it couldn't access updated inventory levels. By 9 o'clock, warehouse managers from 12 locations had called with various problems. The pattern was clear. Every automated process that required weekly maintenance was starting to fail. I performed those maintenance routines every Friday afternoon, a ritual so routine I could do it in my sleep. Brandon's team had changed all the system passwords immediately after my termination, but they didn't understand which background processes required manual oversight. The system appeared to be running normally from their perspective, but critical maintenance tasks weren't executing. Sarah Walsh, the new vice president of operations, called at 10:30. Her voice carried barely controlled panic. "Crystal, I know this is awkward, but we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Could you possibly walk one of our consultants through the weekly maintenance procedures?" "I'm no longer employed by the company," I reminded her. "My access has been revoked." "We could arrange a consulting contract," Sarah said quickly. "Emergency rates immediate payment." I paused, considering the irony. Yesterday, they'd escorted me out for questioning Brandon's judgment. Today, they needed my expertise to prevent operational collapse. I'd be happy to help, but I'll need Brandon to personally request my assistance. Sarah's silence spoke volumes. Brandon's pride would never allow him to admit he'd made a mistake by firing me. Let me see what I can arrange, she said finally. The afternoon brought more crisis calls. The automated shipping interface had stopped communicating with FedEx and UPS, meaning thousands of packages couldn't receive tracking numbers. Customer service was fielding complaints about delayed shipments that hadn't actually shipped yet. Most concerning was the inventory synchronization failure between warehouses and retail partners. Target, Walmart, and Amazon relied on real-time stock level updates to prevent overselling products. Without accurate data, they would either stop placing orders or experience customer complaints about unavailable items. I watched the company's stock price drop 3% on rumors of operational problems. Financial news websites speculated about technology failures and management competency. Brandon's first crisis as CEO was becoming public embarrassment. At 4 o'clock, my phone displayed an unknown number. Crystal, this is Thomas Brennan. I recognized the name immediately. Chairman of the board of directors, longtime friend of Robert's influential voice in company strategy. I'm hoping you might have time for a conversation tomorrow morning, he said carefully. There are some developments the board would like to discuss with you, privately. The implication was clear. Board members were concerned about the operational chaos, but they couldn't address it openly without undermining Brandon's authority. They needed someone with insider knowledge to explain what was really happening. I'd be happy to meet, I said. Should I assume Brandon won't be attending this conversation? Thomas chuckled grimly. You should assume that Brandon doesn't know about it. After hanging up, I realized the situation had evolved beyond simple system failures. The board was preparing to intervene in Brandon's leadership, and they wanted my perspective on the crisis he'd created. But they had no idea that things were about to get much worse. Because while we'd been focused on technical problems, I discovered something that would change everything. The company's biggest competitor, North Star Logistics, had made a hostile takeover bid that afternoon. They were positioning themselves as the solution to our operational instability, offering to acquire our client contracts and warehouse network at a significant discount. Brandon's cost-cutting strategy had inadvertently created the perfect opportunity for our primary rival to destroy us. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 8 in the morning at the downtown Marriott, far from company headquarters, where Brandon might notice unusual activity. I arrived early, ordering coffee in the hotel restaurant while reviewing notes I prepared overnight. Thomas Brennan looked older than his 68 years, stress lines etched deeply around his eyes. He'd joined Robert's company as an investor 15 years ago, helping fund the expansion that transformed a regional operation into a national distribution network. Crystal, thank you for coming, he said, settling into the booth across from me. I'll be direct. The board is extremely concerned about recent operational failures. We need to understand what's really happening. I opened my laptop, displaying system monitoring dashboards that showed the escalating crisis. The inventory management platform requires specialized maintenance that only I know how to perform. Without those procedures, automated processes are failing throughout the network. Thomas studied the data pointing to red warning indicators scattered across the geographic display. How long before this becomes irreversible? We're already past the point of easy fixes, I admitted. Each day without proper maintenance creates exponential problems. By Monday, when the offshore team attempts to implement their replacement system, they'll discover our data structure is completely incompatible with their software. More board members arrived: Patricia Hendricks, former retail executive, David Chang, technology investor, Maria Santos, logistics industry veteran. Each brought decades of business experience and growing alarm about Brandon's leadership decisions. Patricia reviewed financial projections I'd prepared, showing the cost of system failures versus the savings from staff reductions. He's destroying millions in operational efficiency to save thousands in payroll costs. The math doesn't work. There's something else you need to know, I said carefully. Brandon didn't just replace our technology infrastructure. He misrepresented our current system's capabilities to justify the changes. I have email documentation showing he told potential investors that our system was outdated and inefficient. David leaned forward intently. Our system has been featured in trade publications as industry leading. How could he claim it was outdated? I showed them the email chains Jessica had discovered highlighting Brandon's statements to Pinnacle Solutions consultants. He described our custom inventory platform as legacy technology that lacked modern capabilities. Those characterizations were demonstrably false. He's been planning this transformation since taking control, I explained. My termination wasn't reaction to questioning his decisions. It was removing the primary obstacle to his predetermined strategy. Maria asked the question everyone was thinking. What would it take to restore normal operations? I'd anticipated this inquiry. I could rebuild the maintenance protocols and restore system functionality, but it would require full administrative access and authority to make necessary changes. The offshore team would need to step aside temporarily while I stabilized the platform. Thomas's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His expression darkened as he read, North Star Logistics just increased their acquisition offer by 15%. They're positioning this as a rescue operation, claiming they can stabilize our operations where current management has failed. The hostile takeover attempt was gaining momentum precisely because of the operational chaos Brandon had created. North Star's executives understood that technical failures would panic investors and drive down our stock price. They were exploiting Brandon's mistakes to acquire a valuable competitor at discount pricing. We need to act quickly, Patricia said. If North Star succeeds in portraying us as a failing company, shareholders might accept their offer despite its inadequate valuation. David pulled up financial data on his tablet. Our company's actual value is at least 40% higher than North Star's bid, but only if we can demonstrate operational stability. Right now, we look like a distressed asset. I realized this was my opportunity to propose a solution that would address multiple problems simultaneously. The board could authorize me to serve as interim chief technology officer with emergency powers to restore system functionality. Success would prove our operational competence while also removing Brandon from technology decision-making. Thomas considered the implications. That would require formally challenging Brandon's authority as CEO. The board has the power to do so, but it would create significant corporate governance issues. The alternative is allowing North Star to acquire the company Robert spent 30 years building, Maria pointed out. I don't think any of us wants to see that legacy destroyed. My phone interrupted with a call from Marcus Thompson. Crystal, it's getting really bad. The Phoenix warehouse just received 14 truckloads of products we already have too much of, while we're completely out of our fastest-selling items. Customers are canceling orders because we can't fulfill basic requirements. After explaining the situation to the board members, Patricia made the motion I'd been hoping for. I propose we offer Crystal the position of Chief Technology Officer with full authority to restore operational stability. We can address Brandon's role separately. The vote was unanimous. Thomas handed me a formal contract outlining my new responsibilities and compensation package. It included equity options and guarantees that my former team members would be rehired with back pay. When do you want to start? David asked. I smiled for the first time in days. I never really stopped, but as I drove back to company headquarters with my new contract and restored security access, I had no idea that Brandon had been implementing his own desperate plan to salvage the situation. He'd been secretly meeting with our biggest competitors, offering to sell proprietary technology and client information in exchange for personal job security after North Star's acquisition. The man I trained during summer internships was preparing to betray everything his father had built. My new security badge granted access to executive floors I'd never seen before. The 52nd-story conference room overlooked the city skyline, floor-to-ceiling windows, providing a dramatic backdrop for what promised to be an intense confrontation. Brandon sat at the head of a polished granite table, flanked by his Pinnacle Solutions consultants and two executives I didn't recognize. His confident expression faltered when I walked in with Thomas and the other board members. "What's she doing here?" Brandon demanded. I terminated her employment yesterday. Thomas placed my contract on the table. The board has appointed Crystal as Chief Technology Officer with emergency authority to restore operational stability, effective immediately. Brandon's face flushed red as he scanned the document. You can't do this without consulting me. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of this company. You're the CEO of a company currently facing hostile takeover because of operational failures you created, Patricia replied coldly. We have fiduciary responsibility to shareholders that supersedes your personal preferences. I opened my laptop connecting to the conference room's display system. Let me show you the current state of our technology infrastructure. The monitoring dashboard painted a devastating picture. Inventory discrepancies had spread to over 60% of warehouse locations. Customer complaints had increased 400% in the past 48 hours. The automated reorder system had placed duplicate purchases totaling $2.7 million. This is sabotage, Brandon declared. She deliberately damaged the system after being terminated. David Chang pulled out his tablet, displaying the original technical documentation I'd provided to the board. These failures were predicted before Crystal's termination. She warned that the system required specialized maintenance that your offshore team couldn't provide. One of the Pinnacle consultants, a nervous man in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. We've been unable to access the core modules required for system maintenance. The authentication protocols are more complex than our initial assessment indicated. I almost laughed. That's because you assumed you were replacing a simple warehouse management system. What we actually operate is a custom integrated platform that coordinates real-time data across multiple industries and geographic regions. Maria Santos leaned forward. Explain the difference for those of us who aren't technology specialists. I switched to a simplified architectural diagram. Generic warehouse software tracks basic inventory movement: products come in, products go out. Our system predicts customer demand, optimizes supplier relationships, coordinates shipping logistics, and integrates with retail partner systems. It's the difference between a calculator and a supercomputer. Brandon's consultant team exchanged worried glances. They'd clearly never encountered anything this sophisticated before. Their standard implementation procedures were designed for companies with basic operational requirements. The offshore replacement system you purchased can handle simple inventory tracking, I continued, but it can't integrate with our existing supplier networks, shipping interfaces, or retail partner APIs. Implementing it would require rebuilding every external relationship from scratch. Thomas asked the crucial question, how long would that rebuilding process take? 18 to 24 months, I replied, assuming no major complications. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Brandon had committed to implementing a replacement system that couldn't actually replace our current functionality. His cost-saving plan would cost the company years of operational capability. Brandon tried regaining control of the narrative. Every business transformation involves temporary challenges. We can't let fear of change prevent necessary modernization. This isn't change, Patricia said sharply. This is destruction of functional systems without viable replacements. You're dismantling something that works to install something that doesn't. My phone buzzed with an urgent text from Jessica. She was monitoring news feeds and had discovered something alarming. Major retailers are publicly questioning our reliability. Target just announced they're reviewing alternative suppliers. I shared the message with the board. We're about to lose client contracts worth hundreds of millions in annual revenue. Our operational problems are becoming public relations disasters. David pulled up financial news websites on his tablet. Stock price is down 8% since market opening. Analysts are speculating about management competency and technological obsolescence. Brandon stood abruptly. I won't sit here and be blamed for every minor technical glitch. Running a company requires making difficult decisions that not everyone understands. Minor technical glitch, Maria laughed humorlessly. Your decisions have created a crisis that's threatening the company's existence. Thomas took control of the meeting. Brandon, the board is prepared to offer you a choice. You can voluntarily step back from operational responsibilities while we stabilize the situation, or we can call a formal vote of no confidence. Brandon's defiance crumbled as he realized his precarious position. Board members controlled company policy, and they clearly had no faith in his leadership. If I agree to step back, what happens to my position? That depends on how successfully we can resolve the crisis you've created, Patricia replied. I seized the opportunity to outline my restoration plan. Give me 72 hours with full system access and authority to override the offshore implementation. I can restore normal operations and demonstrate our actual technological capabilities. Thomas looked around the table, reading unanimous agreement in his colleagues' expressions. Crystal, you have whatever you need. Brandon, you're relieved of operational responsibilities pending resolution of this crisis. Brandon gathered his papers with shaking hands. You're making a huge mistake. She's going to destroy everything I've tried to accomplish. After he left with his consultant team, Thomas turned to me. How confident are you about fixing this? Completely confident about restoring system functionality, I replied. But there's something else we need to address. North Star's timing isn't coincidental. They're exploiting our temporary weakness to acquire a competitor they couldn't defeat in fair market competition. David nodded thoughtfully. Hostile takeovers often target companies experiencing apparent crises. If we can demonstrate that our operational problems were artificial and temporary, their acquisition argument collapses. I had already started planning the technical recovery process, but I also understood that we were fighting a war on multiple fronts. Restoring system functionality would prove our technological competence. Exposing Brandon's mismanagement would demonstrate that our problems were leadership failures, not fundamental business weaknesses. But as I left the conference room, with my new authority and restored access, I had no idea that the situation was about to become much more complicated because Brandon hadn't given up. He was preparing to implement a scorched earth strategy that would make my restoration efforts infinitely more difficult. And he still had access to systems that could cause irreparable damage. The first indication something was wrong came at 3 a.m. My phone erupted with emergency alerts from system monitoring software I'd installed years ago. Someone with administrative privileges was attempting to delete core database files. I grabbed my laptop, connecting remotely to assess the damage. Brandon, or someone acting on his behalf, was systematically destroying backup archives and configuration files. They were trying to make system restoration impossible even if I regained access, but he'd underestimated my preparation for exactly this scenario. Hidden backup systems I'd never documented were automatically preserving everything to secure off-site servers. Robert had authorized those contingency measures after a competitor attempted corporate espionage 3 years ago. By dawn, I was in my new office, a corner suite with panoramic city views that felt strange after years in the technical department's basement level. My former team members started arriving at 7, looking simultaneously relieved and bewildered. Marcus Thompson was the first to knock on my door. Crystal, I can't believe you're back. When Jessica told us about your new position, we thought she was joking. Sarah Kim followed, carrying a stack of printed reports. The warehouse managers are desperate for guidance. Half of them are threatening to quit because they can't do their jobs properly. I called an emergency team meeting in the main conference room facing 37 employees who'd been scheduled for termination just days earlier. Their expressions ranged from hopeful to skeptical, unsure whether my return represented genuine salvation or temporary reprieve. Everyone keeps their jobs, I announced immediately. The board has authorized me to restore full operational capabilities and rebuild our team. No one is being laid off. The relief in that room was palpable. Janet Foster, the veteran data analyst approaching retirement, actually started crying. I thought my career was over, she said. At 62, who's going to hire someone my age? But celebration was premature. My diagnostic routines revealed the extent of Brandon's sabotage attempt. Critical configuration files had been corrupted, system passwords had been changed again, and several integration points with external partners had been deliberately severed. How bad is it? Marcus asked quietly. I pulled up damage assessment reports on the conference room display. He's tried to ensure that restoring the system would be impossible, but he doesn't understand the redundancy measures we built into the architecture. Working with my reunited team felt like returning home after a long absence. Each person brought specialized knowledge that Brandon's consultants had never bothered to learn. Sarah Kim understood customer behavior patterns that drove demand forecasting. Marcus Thompson knew every warehouse manager personally and could coordinate changes across all locations. By noon, we'd restored basic functionality to the most critical processes. Inventory synchronization resumed between warehouses, and automated reorder systems stopped placing duplicate purchases. Customer service reported that complaint volume was dropping as shipments resumed normal scheduling. But the real breakthrough came when Jessica discovered something extraordinary while reviewing Brandon's computer files. Crystal, you need to see this immediately. She'd found email correspondence between Brandon and executives from North Star Logistics, our primary competitor. The messages revealed a conspiracy that went far beyond simple mismanagement. Brandon had been secretly providing North Star with our client information pricing strategies and operational procedures. In exchange, they'd promised him an executive position with guaranteed salary and equity package after their acquisition of our company. This is corporate espionage, I said, scrolling through months of illicit communication. He's been deliberately weakening the company to facilitate a hostile takeover. The emails revealed Brandon's true motivation for firing our technology team and replacing our systems. He needed to create operational chaos that would justify North Star's acquisition offer while also eliminating employees who might discover his betrayal. Thomas Brennan arrived within an hour of my urgent phone call. His expression grew darker with each email we reviewed. "This is criminal behavior," he said finally. "We need to involve law enforcement immediately." "First, we need to stabilize operations completely," I replied. "If North Star realizes we've discovered Brandon's treachery, they might accelerate their takeover timeline or attempt more aggressive sabotage." David Chang joined us bringing legal counsel and forensic accounting specialists. "We need to document everything before Brandon realizes we've accessed his communications. This evidence will be crucial for both criminal prosecution and civil litigation." The afternoon brought a parade of vindication. Warehouse operations resumed normal efficiency levels. Customer complaints dropped to typical ranges. Automated processes that had been failing for days suddenly worked perfectly. But the most satisfying moment came when financial markets recognized our operational recovery. Stock prices rose 12% as investors realized our recent problems had been artificial and temporary. North Star's acquisition offer now appeared significantly undervalued. "They're withdrawing the hostile takeover bid," Thomas announced after a brief phone conversation. Their entire strategy was based on acquiring a distressed company at discount pricing. Now that we've demonstrated operational stability, their offer looks like an insult. Maria Santos smiled grimly. "Nothing ruins a bargain hunter's appetite like discovering the merchandise isn't actually broken." By evening, we'd not only restored normal operations, but implemented improvements that increase efficiency beyond previous levels. New monitoring systems provided real-time visibility into potential problems before they became crises. Enhanced integration protocols improved communication with retail partners and suppliers. The transformation was so dramatic that trade publications started calling to request interviews about our miraculous turnaround. I deflected media attention, preferring to focus on consolidating our technical improvements and supporting my team's contributions. But Brandon wasn't finished. His final desperate attempt to salvage his position would force me to make the hardest decision of my career, because he still had access to one system that could destroy everything we'd rebuilt, and he was angry enough to use it. The security alert came at 11:45 that night. Brandon was attempting to access the financial reporting system using emergency administrative credentials that technically hadn't been revoked yet. But he wasn't trying to steal money or manipulate records. He was trying to delete 10 years of historical performance data that proved our operational excellence. Without that documentation, North Star could claim our recent improvements were temporary fixes to fundamental problems. They might resume their acquisition attempt based on the argument that we had no track record of sustained competence. I called Thomas immediately. We need to revoke Brandon's access to everything, and I mean everything right now. Legal says we can't take action until morning, Thomas replied. Due process requirements, corporate governance protocols. Then we document everything he's doing and stop him technically rather than administratively. I drove to headquarters using my new executive access to enter the building after midnight. The server room hummed quietly in the basement banks of equipment maintaining the digital infrastructure I'd spent 11 years building. Brandon was there, laptop connected directly to the main database servers. He looked up in shock when I entered, his face pale under the fluorescent lighting. You can't stop me, he said defiantly. I still have legitimate access rights as chief executive officer. Actually, the board suspended your operational authority yesterday, I replied calmly. And what you're doing now is criminal destruction of corporate assets. I'd brought my own laptop using administrative privileges to monitor his activities in real time. He was systematically deleting performance metrics, client satisfaction surveys, efficiency reports, and operational analyses that documented our industry-leading capabilities. You destroyed my career, Brandon said bitterly. I was going to modernize this company, bring it into the 21st century. Instead, everyone treats me like I'm incompetent compared to my father. For the first time, I felt sympathy for his position. Following Robert Hartwell's legacy would challenge anyone, especially someone with limited operational experience. But sympathy couldn't excuse the damage he'd caused. Your father built this company by respecting people's expertise, I said gently. You could have asked for help instead of trying to prove you could do everything alone. Brandon's typing stopped. I couldn't look weak in front of the board. They were already comparing everything I did to his decisions. Asking questions isn't weakness, I replied. Ignoring expertise is. Security guards arrived with Thomas and 2 police officers. Brandon's laptop was confiscated as evidence, and he was formally arrested for corporate espionage and destruction of company property. The emails with North Star executives provided clear proof of criminal conspiracy. The next morning, I called a company-wide meeting to address the crisis and announce our path forward. 500 employees gathered in the main auditorium, their faces reflecting months of uncertainty and confusion. Yesterday marked the end of the most challenging period in our company's history, I began, but it also marked the beginning of a new era built on the principles Robert Hartwell established 30 years ago. I outlined the new organizational structure with expanded roles for experienced employees and guaranteed job security for everyone who'd survived Brandon's attempted purge. The technology department would become the Technology Innovation Center with increased funding for research and development. We're implementing the Robert Hartwell Memorial Fund for Employee Innovation, I announced. Every year, we'll invest $2 million in projects proposed by our team members. The best ideas come from people who understand our operations firsthand. The applause was overwhelming. Janet Foster stood up, followed by Marcus Thompson, then Sarah Kim. Soon, the entire auditorium was on its feet, cheering not just for me, but for the restoration of values they thought were lost forever. 6 months later, our company became a Harvard Business School case study in crisis management and corporate recovery. Students analyze how institutional knowledge and employee expertise can overcome leadership failures when properly supported and empowered. Brandon pled guilty to corporate espionage and received 3 years probation, along with substantial financial penalties. North Star Logistics faced SEC investigation for their role in the conspiracy, and their reputation in the industry suffered permanent damage. But the most satisfying outcome was personal growth throughout our organization. Employees who'd been treated as replaceable expenses during Brandon's tenure were now recognized as valuable contributors to our success. Our retention rate became industry-leading, and recruitment efforts attracted top talent from competitors. I established mentorship programs, pairing experienced workers with new hires, ensuring that institutional knowledge would never again be concentrated in a single person. Cross-training initiatives meant that critical processes could continue even during emergencies or personnel changes. The system I'd originally built to track inventory had evolved into something much larger, a framework for nurturing human potential alongside technological capability. We measured success not just in efficiency metrics, but in employee satisfaction, career development, and work-life balance. At this year's Technology Industry Conference, I shared our story with 3,000 attendees. The presentation focused on recognizing and developing talent rather than replacing people with automated systems. True innovation happens when technology amplifies human expertise, I concluded. The most sophisticated software in the world can't replace institutional knowledge, creative problem solving, or the passion people bring to work they find meaningful. During the question and answer session, a young woman asked about overcoming gender bias in male-dominated industries. Focus on results, I advised. Build something so valuable that your contributions become undeniable. When people see what you can accomplish, they'll stop questioning whether you belong. Another attendee asked about recovering from career setbacks. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to the best opportunity you've never imagined, I replied. Getting fired forced me to recognize my own worth and fight for what I'd built. The story of our transformation resonated far beyond the technology industry. Leadership schools began teaching courses on the importance of institutional knowledge and employee engagement. Management consultants started emphasizing sustainable growth over short-term cost reduction. Robert Hartwell would have been proud of what we'd accomplished, not just in restoring the company he'd built, but in creating something even stronger. We'd proven that treating people with respect and recognizing their expertise isn't just morally right, but also financially successful. Today, our company operates 800 warehouses across North America with expansion planned into international markets. The technology platform I originally built for 12 locations now coordinates supply chains for clients in dozens of industries. But the real measure of our success isn't in operational metrics or financial performance. It's in the culture we've created where expertise is valued, innovation is encouraged, and every employee knows their contributions matter. Looking back on that painful confrontation with Brandon 3 years ago, I realize it taught me the most important lesson of my career. Standing up for yourself and others isn't just about defending what you've built. It's about proving that competence, dedication, and integrity will ultimately triumph over politics, shortcuts, and betrayal. Sometimes the best response to being underestimated is simply demonstrating your worth through actions that speak louder than any words ever could. Have you ever had to fight for recognition of your expertise or defend work that others wanted to discard? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if it resonated with your experiences, subscribe for more stories about overcoming workplace challenges, and share it with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for their own professional worth. Thank you for listening, and remember that your knowledge and dedication have value that no one can take away from you.